storytelling. In this podcast, we will be looking at storytellers, stories, and the reasons that oral storytelling is important in our world today. You would think with all the technology we have available that stories do not have a place anymore, but they are needed more than ever. For in storytelling is where we find truth, we find reality, and we find the heart of what it is to be human. Welcome to the heart of storytelling. My name is Alyssa Curtain, and let's go on an adventure. Welcome to this week's episode. This week we speak with Claire Hennessy, who is a UK storyteller based in the United States. Claire offers us a fantastic tall tale, which I really encourage everyone to listen to. It's very well done. And we also talk about things like festivals and organising and things like bringing storytelling community together, which is something which is close to my heart as well. I hope you enjoy this interview with Claire. Welcome to this week's episode. This week we are speaking with Claire Hennessy, who is from the UK but now lives in California. Welcome to the podcast, Claire.
Oh, hi, good morning. Well, good evening for you, but good morning for me.
I'd love to hear about your storytelling journey. Where did you start, and what's been the progress of your journey, and where are you now?
So really, yeah, my storytelling career had started completely by accident. There was no planning whatsoever involved. I moved over to America in 2008 to marry my boyfriend at the time, but he was actually my first boyfriend when I was 13 at boarding school in England. And I used to I wasn't allowed a boyfriend, so he'd cut a hole in the wire fence and I'd crawl through and meet him in secret. And he was 15 and I was 13, and we went out each other for a couple of months, and then we stopped and can't really remember the end. I think I was very awful teenager and what's called ghosted now. So I did, and I just stopped seeing him. And then I didn't see him for 30 years, came back from the pub one Friday, and I was married, had 2 kids, then I got separated from my husband, divorced, and then I was coming back from the pub one night and thought, oh, I'll just send this old boyfriend an email, because he was now living in California. So I thought, oh, it's like, it's too far away, won't ever see him, that'll be safe. And then 3 years later, he came back and was very, oh yes, of course I remember you. And then he started telling me how much he'd never forgotten me, always loved me, all of that. So it was a very romantic story. I've got 2 kids. He had 3 kids. But 3 years later, I went over and married him. And then because of that, ended up writing a memoir. So I wrote a memoir how we came, because it was sort of quite dramatic and to make it funny. And then because I was writing all the time, I then due to that, I then started telling stories. And I got into it through a local open mic that I went to just up the road from me in California. And then I went to the Moth and started doing that. So I was doing all that sort of storytelling, true personal stories in 5 minutes on a theme. And then the pandemic hit, and I was just getting into my stride. And then some friends of mine, well, one of them in particular said, why don't we do it online? Because there's no shows anymore. And I thought it'll just be a couple of weeks, we're back to normal, like most of us. She was a little bit more farsighted, realised the pandemic was going to go on for a bit longer. So we started up this online show and called it 6 Feet Apart Productions. Obviously, because of the pandemic, we actually started at the end of March in 2020. And then a couple of weeks later, the friend who had the idea in the first place, said, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. So me and Regina Stoops, who's my business partner, carried on. And I'd only met her once, hardly knew her. She didn't know me. And then it's just really worked. We get on very well. She lives in California, about an hour and a half from me. And we were doing shows every single week for free, and we got some really excellent storytellers like Bill Lepp on our show, and Margot Lightman, people like that, really good. And then we also had just people we knew storytelling coming on and telling true personal stories. And then after that, because the pandemic for me was, I hate to say this, it sounds kind of blasphemous, that I have really enjoyed the pandemic. I love being at home with my husband. He worked from home anyway. And storytelling became my life, because there wasn't much else to do at that point. And the internet opened up all the different storytellers and storytelling events that I never knew existed. Like, I didn't know anything really about traditional storytelling, knew nothing about tall tales or braided stories. I mean, they were all new terms that I didn't know anything about. So it was just fascinating to learn about them, when I was supposed to be working. My company, and then in a year later in 2021, I gave up my job and now do it full time.
Wow. What were you doing before? What was your job?
So my job in America was an event management company, and we planned events, corporate, big corporate, conferences and things like that. I had a very small part, very boring small part to play in it. But my background before that was sort of organising corporate events. I used to do a treasure hunt for corporate entertainment in England. It's all based around red telephone boxes called the Red Box Run. It will be like all spy stuff in London, and people go around with Polaroid cameras in those days, pre-mobile phone, of course. Finding secret agents hiding in a hotel and trying to identify telephone books and doing silly dares, all around London. And then I also did another, more like a car rally type of thing, in the countryside. So I'm used to sort of doing organising and planning, which is jolly useful when you come to do things later in life, I suppose.
Yeah, what a fascinating story. So do you work full time now as a storyteller?
Yeah. Yeah. So I run 6 Feet Apart Productions with Regina, and we now organised the Bay Area Storytelling Festival, which was a massive storytelling festival, the biggest one on the West Coast. And then in 2017, I think they all got burnt out. Nobody knew was coming to volunteer like they don't. And so it just went on a pause, if you like. And then over the pandemic, somebody I knew said, "Oh, Claire, why don't you restart it?" And not knowing anything about organising a festival, I thought, well, maybe, maybe. And I spoke to Linda Yamoto, who used to be the chair, because I got to know her over the pandemic. I said, well, we could have a chat about it. And now here I am. It's so much work to organise a festival, all of it unpaid. Just add in another massive, burden of responsibility to my plate. But actually, I love it. It's a really great way of getting to know more storytellers more personally, and it's
Mm.
lovely to be creative with how we organise the festival. So we just brought
Mm.
it back. So we're now about to have our fourth festival since we started it again in 22, I think 22, yeah, we started it in 2022, and now we're just about to have our next festival in June.
Amazing. Oh, that's
Yeah.
really great. And so in the festival, are you celebrating just personal tales or a bit of both?
No, it's everything. So
Yeah.
now since Regina and I got to know the storytelling world more, we really love the traditional tales and all the different, folklore and, stories from different cultures. I mean, it's just so rich and diverse, and I knew nothing about it, nor did Regina. And so we're like newbies thinking, oh, it's so exciting and it's so interesting, and all these different, ways of telling stories and, ways to learn things in a much more interesting way. So no, we just absolutely love it. So our festival, we like to make it as diverse as possible. I know that's a bit of
Mm.
a rude word at the moment, but we like to have as much diversity in culture and in ethnicity that we possibly can. So we have, traditional tales, we have personal tales, we have all sorts, people who sings, anything really. So yeah, that's what we're doing. So it's we've got great storytellers coming up.
Amazing. So when you're organizing a festival, what are some of the things that you have to think about to make
Well,
it
it's a
successful?
lot. Excuse me. I had no idea how much was involved. I mean, it's a bit like if you think of organizing a wedding, you think, well, it's just a ceremony and then a meal, isn't it? And yet there's so many things to think about. So it's like that, but on steroids. So you have to think about the venue, which is really critical. Can people get there? Where is it? Do they know about it? Nowadays, because what we do at 6 Feet Apart is we do a lot of the tech side. So we live stream. My husband, who's really techie, started live streaming our shows to YouTube at the very start because he said then you don't get restricted by Zoom of how many people you can have, and it'd be a great
Mm.
platform. And then you can have all the special effects. So we do lots of special effects on 6 Feet Apart, and we live stream. So 6 Feet Apart sponsor the event with the Storytelling Association of California. So we do all the live streaming as well. So we have to make sure that there's internet connection, and that's been a whole bag of worms. Um, you know, is the seating, is it accessible to everybody? What's the
Mm.
parking like? How can they get there? So, and we did it twice in Orinda, which is in the East Bay. And then a storyteller we know really well is a school tutor in a really nice school in Santa Rosa, which is in the North Bay. And their school is absolutely stunning, and in the hills and county of Santa Rosa, and they were building this purpose-built theatre. It seats about 350 people, totally state of the art, absolutely amazing. And they wanted to get more community and storytelling and different people to use it. So we said, we really, really, really want you to come to Santa Rosa and do the festival here. And then we went and saw it and thought, wow, this is amazing. And so last year was the first year, and that literally the theatre had only just been built. It was brand spanking new, but nobody knew how to work it. So there were some technical challenges, but we did manage to do it, and we did live stream it. And we record it if you want to watch it later. But it was a beautiful theatre. But the problem with that is we're still trying to get, we just, reintroduced the audience in the East Bay, and then we moved it to the North Bay, and it's kind of difficult to get there by public transport because it's not great in this part of California. If you're in the city, it's wonderful, but anything out of the city, particularly in the North Bay, East Bay's got BART, and that's quite good, but in the North Bay, it's really terrible. So that has been a challenge, and we're trying to build up our audience in Santa Rosa, which is quite rich, and it has a lot of comedy and storytelling and things like that, but we're still new, so we're really trying to push our publicity at the moment and try and do a bit better in Santa Rosa. But there's a lot you've got, so you've got to think about all these things. How will you get people there? What type of storytelling? How's the schedule going to work? It's quite complicated. There's a lot involved.
And is there a team that, how many people?
There's four of us mainly. Two of them, Linda Yamoto and Sarah Armstrong, they were working on the festival in its previous incarnation. And then there's Regina and I. So there's only really four of us. And then we have a few others who are like on subcommittees who are very helpful. So there's probably, I don't know, 6, 8 altogether that volunteer and help. But the four of us are really the ones that run it and do most of the work. So it's not a lot of
No.
we're trying to get more, and we're trying to get younger people involved as well, because we're all getting older and things like that, and your energy does go. So I'd love to get new people, younger people who have got some different ideas. It's just challenging to get them to come and volunteer, because it's really, you're just volunteering loads of your time.
Yeah. And you've got to have a passion for something if you're going to volunteer, don't you? You need to care about, have an investment emotionally to it. I'm curious about the finding the right venue. Like geography can be a restriction in terms of where you place things, because public transport really needs to be a big part of things if you're organising a festival or something, doesn't it?
It really does. I know. And there is a train that goes from a ferry terminal, so you can get there from San Francisco all the way up to Santa Rosa. It's just only has 2 carriages, and it's it's limited, and the traffic on a Friday night, because we've made it a sort of a weekend. We do a Friday afternoon and evening bit, and then also all day Saturday. And so try to make it so that people come up, stay in hotels. There's wine tasting. There's the Charles Schulz Museum. There's lots of beautiful walks and redwoods and things to see. So it's a really good location in terms of tourist attractions. It's just trying to get people to come up and brave that traffic. On a Saturday, it's not so bad, but Friday evening is terrible. But if we're trying to get it so they come up in the afternoon, do a couple of things, and then we have what we call sunset stories, and we did this lovely storytelling. It was literally magical last year. They've got this huge cafeteria, which is it's just a lovely dining space, and it's floor to ceiling windows, and they all open up, and we had this lovely starry sky, but it gets a little bit chilly. It was in the very first weekend of May last year, and it was a little chilly in the evening. So being inside just protected you a little bit from some of the wind, but you could just see for miles on the countryside, stars were twinkling, little lights, and we did food, and it was just the most wonderful evening. So we're going to do that again, and we have the featured storytellers telling then, and just introduces people. But you don't have to go to that. You could just come for Saturday if you want to. But it was lovely. We're really hoping that we can do more of that. We're going to do it again because it was so successful. And try and introduce a new audience to storytelling, because it's like the world's best kept secret, isn't it? I mean, one of the missions of 6 Feet Apart, when I first started it, and I realised I didn't know. Well, I realised all the information that Regina and I we didn't know. We didn't know storytelling was like this. It's like, why don't we know? Why is it? I always think of it to a buffet table, and you've got comedy, you've got acting, you've got music, you've got theatre, all these things, and you know, opera, whatever. You take what you like and you just leave the rest. You don't have to go to opera if you don't want to, but you don't have to do comedy if you don't want to. And there's all different types of comedy, but you know about them. And then storytelling's hiding underneath the tablecloth, under the table. Nobody knows about it. It's like, why? Why doesn't anybody know about it? So I'm trying to get it put onto the buffet table, and then you can decide if you want it or not. But I have to admit, I've not been very successful at doing that. It's a
I'm
really
doing the same thing. That's my part of my mission is get it on the buffet is part of
yeah,
my
I know.
intention
Why
as
don't
well.
people know
Yeah.
about it? It's
I
shocking,
know.
isn't it? Because storytellers are so brilliant. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
absolutely in awe of the talent that I've discovered. You know, it's like, wow, you know, like there's a film that just come out on Netflix, The 688, about all the black women in the army, or well, military, I suppose you call it, in the war, World War II, who were just given this terrible task because they weren't giving any proper tasks to do, and they did an amazing job at sorting the mail. But before that film, Charlotte Blake Alston, who's the most incredible storyteller, she's going to be one of our featured tellers this year. I heard her about 2 years ago doing that story on the National Storytelling Network on a show they did online, and she just told the story, and the amount of detail and intricacy and really interesting facts that she told. She must have done it from memory. I cannot imagine how she did that. I was just floored by it, and it was so uplifting and traumatic to hear. And now here's this film, you know. So
Mhm.
why is she as celebrated as she should be? I mean, she's done amazingly well. She's done incredible things, but it's still she's not a worldwide name, you know,
Mm,
a household name, I should probably say, and she
mm,
should be, as
mm,
should many others. You know, I don't
mm.
understand why not.
No. And you yourself, what sort of stories do you like to tell in general?
Also, the reason I got into storytelling, apart from the writing, is I decided about maybe 2016, I was going to come out and be a comedian. And that you have to understand, you probably understand being British, like it felt like I was coming out as I was being gay or something in the 80s. So it was like, I'm going to be a comedian. And I could feel all my friends saying, "So you think you're funny, do you? Well, you know, show us then. Why do you think you could be a comedian?" And it felt really cringy and embarrassing. So, but I thought I'm going to try and do it. I've always made my friends laugh and things like that. Well, I'll try and be a comedian. And then luckily, thank goodness, I've got very powerful angels. They put me into a workshop with somebody who was a comedian and a storyteller. And she told me that in America, which is the comedy is completely different and the path of a comedian is different than in
Mm,
England. And obviously, I was thinking of England, but I was living in America. So she said, in America, this is what you have to do. And it was you have to go to the local famous comedy club and you have to go every single night, but virtually for a year. And at the end of that year, you might get a 5 minute slot. And in that 5 minute slot, you have to have a joke every 15 seconds. And then if you're successful at that, the pinnacle of your career is to be one of those late night show hosts. And I thought to myself, there's nothing about that that I would like to do. Just not interested in that. And then she went, this is the path of a storyteller. And she explained what storytelling was, which I didn't fully understand. I went, I'm going to go that way. So it just completely changed the course of my career. And the absolute genius thing about being a storyteller, particularly I like to be a funny storyteller, is that nobody expects you to be funny. So if you tell a joke and they get it, it's just a lovely surprise. So it was just like, well, that's fantastic. There's no pressure then. I can just tell my stories, and if they find them funny, lovely, and if they don't, it doesn't really matter. I'm just telling a story.
Oh, great. So you're using humor, you're doing like you're bridging that gap between stand-up and storytelling. You know,
Yes.
it's that, yeah, you're in that in-between space, which is lovely. That's
Yeah,
really
and my
good.
my business partner, Regina Stoops, was a stand-up comedian for 20 years. So she did do that path, a lot of it, and was very successful, and she's hilarious. So there's both of us who like to be funny. And then we just now tell stories that they're not always funny, but mostly funny.
Mm. So are they folk tales and stuff that you found
Oh,
or
so no. So what I started off was with the Moth and that type of stuff, where there were true personal stories on a theme told in about 5 minutes, which was really good practice for me because it really focuses your mind. If you've got to tell a proper story with a beginning, middle, and end in 5 minutes, I mean, you really have to
Mm.
cut out all that nonsense that I wanted to say, go off in tangents. You can't do it in 5 minutes. So it was a very good way of starting because it meant that I was very disciplined about time. And then I got, obviously, when I got to started 6 Feet Apart, we've got to know more things, and I got to tell longer stories. I started telling a 10-minute story, which seemed absolutely terrifying to have to tell a 10-minute story. And now I absolutely love telling 10-minute stories. It's my favorite. And then I've done Fringes, which is a 45-minute story. So, I've really branched out. Mostly it's true personal, but I go into a lot more depth and it's not all funny. Some of it's funny. And then I started getting into a braided story, which is when you braid a traditional tale with a personal story. And I really enjoyed that. I've done a couple of those, which I really love. And then my new favourite thing is tall tales. There's a couple called Anne Rutherford and Norm Brecky, who are really great storytellers, individually and together. They're married. And they're just fantastic. And they do the Good Liars Club. So about 4 or 5 times a year, they have a show where they have 4 or 5 people tell tall tales. And then they also have a festival every year in August, and they have everybody who's been on their show tell at the festival. So I think I've done it 3 or 4 times there. So I came out with all these lovely tall tales, and that's just so much fun because you can just make stuff up. It's just so I have a lot of, because my life's a little bit crazy anyway, so people think I'm making it up anyway. So I've done some of that and then just gone a bit out there as well.
Would you like to tell a tall tale?
I could. I've got a tall tale I told for them, which is about my mother, which is quite appropriate because I'm actually in England at the moment, looking after my mum and making sure she's getting into her new house okay. And she's lived quite an exciting life. She did, learnt to fly a private plane when she was 50 and things like that. And she's been really adventurous. And I think her being adventurous and just trying stuff that she didn't know has enabled me to just, I'll go and move to America and I'll start storytelling. And, if it works, it works. If it doesn't matter. It's not the end of the world. Okay, so this is the story I told for them. So I always wished my mum would be like other mothers. I just really wanted her to sit at home and knit in front of the telly or something equally boring but safe. Now, she was a single mother for a part of it, and she went to work every day at this firm of accountants called the Bean Counters, or at least that's what she told us. But I always wondered, the dress code was slightly odd. Some days she would go to work in a bright red cocktail dress and high heels, and on others she'd be dressed all in black with combat boots. When I asked her about it, she just passed it off as casual Friday, even when it was a Tuesday. Now, I never quite worked out what she did, but she was always really busy. I can remember her taking us to the park on a Sunday with me and my 2 sisters, and while we were playing on the swings, she'd often meet mysterious men in long coats and trilby hats and sit there on the park bench. She was quite pretty, so I just assumed they were chatting her up. Now, she's always been someone who can turn her hand to anything. She could fix the plumbing if we had a water leak, change a flat tire in double quick time, or even just mend the fan belt using her stockings. But her knowledge of first aid seemed to go a bit beyond all my friends' mothers with their bandages and sticky tape. Let me give you an example. When I was 8 years old, I was upstairs in my bedroom doing my French homework, and I had the lid of my thick felt pen suctioned to the end of my tongue, like we did in those days. And then suddenly I inhaled it, and it got stuck in my throat, and I couldn't breathe. It was awful. I stumbled downstairs, gasping and pointing to my throat and my neck, and found my mum, who immediately stuffed 2 fingers over my throat to try and make me sick and bent me over the sink. Now, it didn't actually work, but what it did do was, I think bending over the sink made it go down a little bit into my lungs, so I could actually breathe. And I told her what I'd done, and she realised she couldn't fix that one, so she'd have to take me to hospital. So she bundled me into the car. And of course, mum being mum, we didn't have a normal, soccer mum car. She had a fast, flashy Triumph TR4A sports car. She absolutely loved it. It was this beautiful metallic pale blue with that bump on the bonnet, which was very recognizable of being a Triumph TR4, and then lovely shiny spoked wheels. So we took off in it like it was bloody jet propelled. I have to say, it was probably the scariest drive of my life, and not just because I couldn't breathe. Now, it was rush hour traffic in London where we lived at the time, and I think she drove faster than James Bond being chased by Jaws shooting at him with a machine gun. She was overtaking on blind corners, driving on the wrong side of the road, and at one point she even mounted the pavement to get around a bus, leaving this scattering of terrified pedestrians in her wake. And as we were driving, the pen lid would go from halfway down my chest up onto my throat, and then I couldn't breathe. Mum looked at me with the whites of her eyes scaring me more than her actual driving. Was I going to die? I said to myself. Now, we were still a few miles out from the hospital, and then the traffic was backed up like the parking lot at the end of the FA Cup. So she suddenly stopped, screeched, and did a sharp left and parked in the middle of screeched to halt in the middle of a nearby park. She shouted at me to get out and lie down on the grass. Were we going to have a last picnic before I died? I wondered. She scrabbled around in the glove box of the car and came up with a flask of whiskey, a Bic biro, a cigarette lighter, a Swiss Army penknife, and some wet wipes left over from our last picnic. She ripped the pen into pieces and opened up the flask. She paused, looked at me, and then took a large slug of whiskey. And then she stuck the transparent hollow tube of the Bic biro into the flask, presumably to sterilize it. Then she opened up the sharpest knife and put it underneath the flame of a lighter. I was choking and could hardly breathe. Then she wiped my neck with a wet wipe and then ordered me, "Be quiet, Claire, and just lie still." Thankfully, at that moment, I passed out as she gave me an emergency tracheotomy right there in the park while the ducks quacked on the bloody pond. I awoke in a hospital bed, surrounded by doctors, heaping praise on Mum for saving my life. She was just shrugging off their compliments and lit up a cigarette. Well, it was just the early 70s. Now, my mum has, as you can imagine, always been the adventurous type. When we went on holiday every year to Spain or Portugal, she'd hire a boat for us all, and she just seemed to know how to sail it as easily as she drove a car. She could water ski on one leg, windsurf with just one arm, and she often used to swim across the English Channel just for fun. But her favourite thing of all was to fly a plane, and she would often take us up in a small four-seater aircraft for a little jaunt around the south of England where we lived at that time. Then one day she took me up in an old two-seater British Tiger Moth biplane. I don't know if you know them. They've got two cockpits, one in front of the other, and then one wing below and one wing above. I was in the front cockpit and Mum was behind me with all the controls. We could only speak to each other by pressing the two microphones onto your throat, and then you had earphones in the hat that you put on. And it was really difficult to understand. At the best of times, the speech would be really muffled and distorted over the noise of the engine. And I remember on one trip telling her I desperately needed to go to the loo. And she just thought I meant, could we see the Louvre, and flew us over to bloody France. Anyway, on this day, we'd been flying around for a while, and the cloud cover was just getting thicker and thicker. I could hardly see more than 20 yards in front of us. "Keep an eye out for other planes," Mum cheerfully shouted, her words a bit muted, so I was really hoping I'd misheard her. "Other planes? Don't we have radar for that?" I tried to swivel my head from side to side to watch like eyes on stalks, a bit like watching an exciting, terrified tennis match. I was just literally terrified we were going to have a crash mid-air. And then a few minutes later, I noticed a bit of a change. The loud whining sign of the propeller in front of me was slightly different. It stuttered, stopped for a moment, and then started again. Before I could react, suddenly the whole plane started vibrating. It was like this huge burst of turbulence, but much worse than on a normal passenger airplane. And then when the vibrating stopped, so did the propeller. I mean, it literally just stopped and then dropped off. as though it was just like, as though the vibrations as it loosened all the nuts and bolts holding it together. I could see it swirling in the clouds beneath us as it dropped. I screamed, "Mum, the whirly thing's fallen off." Her voice was quite muffled, but I think she said quite calmly, "Don't worry, Claire, I'll just find us somewhere to land. Good job I had those gliding lessons recently." At that moment, the aircraft plunged down through the clouds. My stomach lurched into my mouth, along with the cream tea I'd eaten before we left. I clamped my hands over my mouth and looked for a bag to be sick in, anything to be sick in. There was literally nothing in the cockpit, nothing at all, not even my handbag, as Mum had insisted I'd leave it behind in the car. I considered my options. I could lean over the side of the plane and be sick as we dived, but Mum was right behind me, and that didn't really seem like the polite or safe thing to do. There was nothing for it. I opened up my coat pocket and vomited there, just grateful it was quite big enough to do the job. Ugh. We emerged from the clouds to find ourselves in not in the beautiful green countryside of West Sussex, but in the middle of London traffic. We flew over the famous green and cream MI5 building, home to James Bond and other spies, living up to its nickname of Legoland, and Mum, for some reason, waggled the wings of the plane. And then suddenly the London Eye was right in front of us. Mum quickly turned the plane on its side, and in an aerobatic manoeuvre worthy of a World War II flying ace, she scraped the plane through one of the spokes of the wheel, to the absolute horror of the tourists drinking champagne in the pods. "Oh my God, Mum," I shouted, my heart thumping like it might explode. "We're going to die." "Oh, do be quiet, dear. I need to concentrate." Then we were flying over Westminster Bridge, swerved around Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament, and onto Trafalgar Square. I was covering my face with my hands and started praying. As I peered through my fingers, I saw the statue of Horatio Nelson on my left, so close I could almost reach out and touch him. Now, I know I was panicking, but I swear I saw him cover his face with his eyes. His face with his hands as we swooped past him, missing him by inches. We flew on down the Mall, and then Buckingham Palace rose up before us. Oh my God, we were going to crash into the most famous house in Britain, the Queen's home. Somehow, Mum managed to lift the nose of the plane over the roof, just knocking the flagpole with the Union Jack flying high, indicating that the Queen was in residence as we glided over. And then we were over the other side, and I could see this great expanse of green. But it wasn't empty. There looked to be hundreds of people in fancy clothes, tents and tables, chairs, and there was even the Royal Marines band playing in one corner. We were going to literally crash the Queen's world-famous Royal Garden Party. "Hold on!" I heard Mum shout as we came down. People screamed and scattered in all directions, a bit like cockroaches. So instead of a bumpy crash, though, like I was expected, we landed on the grass like it was made of cotton wool. I was amazed. Mum slowed the plane by zigzagging across the grass, unfortunately ruining the Queen's beautiful award-winning croquet lawn in the process. And then we came to a shuddering stop in one of the huge flower beds of startlingly pink roses. After a pause, where the plane wasn't the only thing to be trembling, I caught my breath, my heart thumping, my hands glued to my knees in terror. Mum leapt out of the cockpit and ran to see if I was all right. We were then immediately surrounded by the Queen's Guard in their tall black fuzzy hats and red uniforms with glitteringly gold buttons, and frog marched towards the palace. Are we going to be arrested and thrown in the dungeons? I mean, we had totally ruined her garden party, not to mention the beautiful croquet lawn. Without thinking, I thought, I'm going to take a picture of this at least, and put my hand in my coat pocket. Then I remembered. As we got nearer, I noticed that the Queen was waving her arms, and then she was speaking to one of her Secret Service bodyguards, who then ran over, spoke to the guard in charge. He looked at us in surprise, shrugged, and then just walked away. The Secret Service agents came up to my mum and saluted. "Great landing, Special Agent Wilson," he said, looking at her in something approaching awe. "The Queen would like to speak with you, Mum." As we came up to the Queen, she didn't seem cross, was actually smiling. She took my mum's arm and led her back to the palace. As I trailed behind, I could hear the Queen happily saying, "Lovely flying display, Rosemary. I haven't seen you since you taught me how to skydive for the 2012 Olympics." I was gobsmacked. As I was trying to process what had just happened, suddenly everything started falling into place. Things began to make sense, and I realised that now I was secretly thrilled that my mum wasn't like the other mothers and didn't just sit at home and knit. How's that one?
Amazing. That was just fabulous. Moments of belief and disbelief, you know, keeping going with you on the journey.
I mean, not to be true, I have actually got a tracheotomy. I did do that. Thankfully, Mum didn't do it. She did drive me to hospital doing all those other things then.
Amazing.
And she doesn't know how to fly, and we did get lost in clouds. And she told me to look for other planes. So it was terrifying.
So I've not had a guest who does tall tales. Can you tell me a bit more about what they are and how you create them?
Well, with that one, I wanted to tell a story, but I've been wanting to tell a story about my mum for a long time, a proper serious story about it. And so I've been thinking about that for a while. And then this opportunity to tell at the festival came up for the Good Liars Club. And I just thought, had lots of other ideas, but I thought, well, I want to tell about my mum. And I looked at all the different things, and I'd had a tracheotomy when I was 8, and Mum had driven me in her TR4 in a crazy journey to get there. And then she did learn to fly when she was 50, and she did do windsurfing and other things. She was always trying stuff. She didn't do it very successfully, obviously, some of it. Windsurfing was a nightmare, so was water skiing. But, she did do it. She learned to fly and did loads of things. So I just made it this fun thing. And then I was chatting to Regina, and, being American, she was fascinated by all the landmarks of England. So I thought, well, that might be a fun thing to do, to get her to fly through London and crash the Queen's garden party.
Oh no, it's just fabulous. I really love the embellishment, which is still so believable. You set it up so it was believable in that sense. So it was great. So this podcast is called The Heart of Storytelling, and you've obviously been around a lot of storytellers and done a lot of different things. So what do you think is at the heart of storytelling?
Well, it's kind of hard to quantify, I think, and it's different from a lot of people, but ultimately it's just this connection that you have. I mean, for me particularly, because I really got to know it during the pandemic when we were very isolated in our own little bubbles. But for me, the world just opened up. I mean, obviously, thank God for the internet. But I just discovered this whole community that goes on, and it's really connecting. And on the whole, it's very non-competitive. Most people are very supportive. Everyone's trying to help each other, not hinder each other. Whereas comedians, I feel a bit more competitive. Whereas I don't, and although I think they're supportive too, but storytelling really is communicative. And like for example, when there was that awful hurricane on the East Coast at the end of last year, a few of us, like we did it with 6 Feet Apart and another producing company we know on the East Coast, we put together a fundraising show for them, and we asked all these different, I think 20 different top storytellers to come and tell stories, and absolutely they just dropped what they were doing, told a story, didn't take any money, and all the money went to to help people during the hurricane. We were just one of many things doing that. And there's lots of different, opportunities to help less well-off storytellers, either with money or the experience. People mentor other people. If you've got a problem, you can ask somebody and they'll absolutely drop everything and help you. So I think storytelling as a community is amazing, and I'm so thankful to be part of it. But also stories do really connect you when like listening to Charlotte Blake Alston tell this story about these people in the military, these women in the military who are being so really bullied, I suppose, by the white officers. And it was so transformative for me, just to hear that and to get a better understanding. And when all the Black Lives Matter movement happened over the pandemic, that was really amazing to hear people's stories. Like one of the black storytellers I know, he was telling just if he needs to go to the bank, he has to make sure that he's dressed quite nicely. He's not wearing a hoodie. He has to be, doing what he's doing and not to look in any way dangerous because just
Mm.
being black would be enough for them to be a bit suspicious. And I suppose
Mm.
as a white person, you don't even think about that. And
Mm.
so it got me to have a much better understanding just of how people live in general.
Mm.
And that's just a very small bit, but there's obviously a lot more to it than that.
Mm. And so, I mean, that's a really important point. Connection and community is what you've talked about. So, if
Yeah.
we think about the world as it is and moving forward, what's the place of the oral tradition in the world moving forward? Why do we need it?
I think it's even more needed than it is now, particularly with what's going on in America right now. I mean, it's kind of a scary place to be. Um, and there's a lot of misinformation and division and arguing and people, it's either black or white. There's no grey area. And
Mm.
I think if storytelling can somehow try and bridge some of that community and try and, tell the story of somebody like an immigrant, for example.
Mm.
People, at the moment of being immigrants are being cast as the worst evil known to man. I mean,
Mm.
basically everybody in America is an immigrant, really. And so,
Mm.
if you can hear their story and hear about from a personal point of view, then that really helps. And then there's a lot of people who do traditional stories, like in England and Ireland and Scotland. Really, the majority of stories that are told are traditional. And then you've got like a universal truth. So you
Mm.
can hear a folk tale, and there'll be a universal truth going through that you can apply to your lives. So
Mm.
it's just very interesting. So the future is uncertain, I'd say, but I'm really
Mm.
hoping with the advent of people like the Moth that they've really got storytelling into the home, and a lot of people have heard of the Moth, even if they
Mm.
haven't heard of a wider bit of storytelling. But if we can all come together and try and do that and take it a bit wider, I mean, television seems to be the way to do that. There's also a lot of radio stations that do it as well.
Mm. And I guess YouTube is, it's probably the most
Mm,
popular social media app in the world,
yeah,
YouTube. Yeah, because it's instant and it's video and yeah,
yeah,
it
definitely.
has the algorithms in it as well. So, you get to see
Yeah, so
what
a
you
lot
want
of
to
us are
see.
trying to put stuff on YouTube and make it shorter, and
Mm.
everyone's got a attention span of a gnat now, but it's quite difficult to get a story into a minute. But we try and do different things so that we can do that. I know there's 99-second stories and 1 minute stories, and you can actually tell a little story in a minute. It's not terribly deep and meaningful, but you can tell a story.
And I guess telling really short stories is, teaching. If you can listen to 1 minute, maybe you could listen to a 3 minute, or maybe you could listen to a 5 minute. I suppose it's
Yeah.
teaching people that, you can listen to longer form things.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. And we try and make ours, we do a lot of different things. Like we had Megan Wells, who's the most phenomenal storyteller and actress. She portrays, historical characters, and she does Princess Diana. So we had her telling Princess Diana's story from the grave, if you like, So
Mm.
she talks about her life in the past. It was fascinating. It was a really great show, and then we had a
Mm.
Q&A afterwards. And so
Yeah.
we try and do lots of different things like that, as well as, we had Odds Bodkin doing the Odyssey, and so that was another one we did. So just trying to try different things out and, make it a bit creative and not just do the same thing each time, so that to try and introduce people to different genres of storytelling.
And so I imagine you've had some really great experiences over your time. Do you have any examples of things
Mm.
that you would like to share?
Recently, I was one of the featured storytellers at the St. Louis Storytelling Festival in Missouri, which was amazing. And Charlotte Blake Alston was one of the tellers. But what I also had to do was tell to children, and I hadn't really done that before. It's utterly terrifying. I don't mind standing up in front of 2 or 3 thousand people in a tent and telling a story. That doesn't faze me now at all. But telling to 100 kindergartners, it was like, oh my goodness, that is absolutely terrifying. So what do I do? And so that was quite an experience. It was really fun. I mean, I've always liked kids, and they were like, "Who is this strange person with a funny voice and pink hair?" So that was fun to do. So I did a fractured fairy tale, and then I talked to them about England and some of our customs, and it was just lovely.
Oh, that sounds like a great memory. So, do you have any advice for people, like particularly around festival organisation, or just organising things that might help people who are thinking about doing that,
I
or
think you just
anything
got
to
to
do with
start.
storytelling?
I mean, I knew nothing about storytelling. I can freely admit it. And then you just learn as you go along. And because the storytelling community is so supportive, um, if you don't know and you ask, then people will tell you. And I'm really, if anybody ever wants to ask me anything, I'm more than happy to give up, some of my advice and some of my experiences and what to do and what not to do. I mean, we've had a lot of things go wrong, and then we've learned from what went wrong. Like at one of the
Mm.
Bay Area storytelling festivals, we were live streaming it, and their internet, even though we tested it multiple times on the day, didn't work. It was just terrifying. So then we had to get around that problem as well. So there's lots of
Mm.
things. If anybody wants to ask a question or to, I'm more than happy to answer questions, but also people just are very supportive. So just start and see how you get on.
Amazing. And if someone wants to tell tall tales, do you have some advice?
Well, yeah, just tell it. I mean, tall tales in some ways are the easiest because you just make stuff up, and they don't have to be funny. They can just be dramatic, or they can be just interesting. And normally tall tales tend to be funnier, just because of the fantastical nature of it. But and the best way to learn about storytelling is to listen to other storytellers. I mean,
Mm.
that's how I've done 90% of my learning, going to live events, looking online. There's so many, there are not as many as there were during the pandemic. There's still a lot of the, on our website, sfapshows.com, we've got lots and lots of videos on our website and also on our YouTube channel that are just free. You can just go and watch
Mm.
them. In fact, we've got that one with the fundraising show that we did for the after the hurricane. There's lots of really fantastic world-class storytellers, as well as just people who have just started storytelling, and they're all on that show, and it's all free. So you can
Mm.
just go and watch it, and just watch other storytellers, and then you'll learn what to do.
Amazing. You've been wonderful, Claire. I've learned a lot from you today. So where can people find you if they want to find out about you and the work that you do?
So I used to run a podcast, and I put it on pause and never quite got back to it. So I'm known as the Bonkers Brit. So you can go to thebonkersbrit.co.uk. You can go to 6 Feet Apart Productions, which our website is our initials, sfapshows.com. And you can just email me at thebonkersbrit@gmail.com.
Oh, thank you so much today, Claire. You've been amazing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alyssa. It's been fun.
If you've enjoyed the podcast and would like to support me to continue the work that I'm doing, please head to buymeacoffee.com/Alyssa Curtain and make a donation or sign up for a subscription. This is a passion project, and as such, it is voluntary. So your donations make it easier for me to continue this work. Thank you for your support. Well, that's our episode for today. I hope you've enjoyed learning about storytelling and folktale, fairytale, myth, legend, or personal tales, wonder tales, all sorts of stories, and the art of storytelling, and why we really need to continue using it today. You can find more information about me at alyssacurtain.com or at Alyssa Curtain Stories on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. I hope that you can find your heart in storytelling.